We have different ways of assessing weight. One of them is body mass index. This is referred to as a broad stroke measure because it doesn't really tell us anything about the person's muscle mass or body mass. It's based on height and weight. It doesn't take into account age. It doesn't take into account gender or lean body mass. Now, I will tell you that I'm not going over numbers in this presentation because if you want to find out what your BMI is supposed to be based on your height and weight, you know where to look for those things. I don't want to cover them. So that's not going to be included in this presentation. Body composition is another way of assessing one's health. Let's look at these two people. They are the same weight, or at least they're supposed to be, depending on how well I formatted this picture. While their BMI would be the same because they're the same height and the same weight, their body composition is different. The person on the right has a higher muscle mass than the person on the left. So body composition is a better indicator in a number of cases of somebody's health risk. And then there are these other ways of assessing body composition. Some of you may have used skin calipers, the one in the lower right. The more experienced the person is at using these calipers, the more accurate the measurements will be. Electrical impedance is when an electrical current is sent through the body. Electricity travels differently through different tissues, and that can give you an estimate of body fat. Nobody's ever been electrocuted, so this is a very low-level electricity. Underwater weighing, because different tissue displaces water at a different rate. The bod pod is something that can be used to assess body composition. So these are a number of different tools that can be used to look at body composition. And then there's something called waist circumference or waist to hip ratio. This uses the high-tech instrument known as the tape measure. And actually, in older adults, it can be a better predictor of health risk than in younger adults. And this is where we get the apple versus pear person. The greater the amount of body fat around the abdomen, we would call that person an apple-shaped. The greater the amount of fat around the hips would be a pear-shaped person. And that fat found in the middle of the, the amount of fat found in the abdominal area, the apple-shaped person, we refer to that as intra-abdominal or visceral fat, fat found within the abdomen. Viscera is organs, so the amount of fat found in and around the organs. This person on the right has a greater amount of intra-abdominal or visceral fat, and this is associated with higher risk of chronic illnesses like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and high blood cholesterol or heart attack risk. There are a number of different factors involved in gaining weight or becoming overweight. Metabolic factors include something called the set point theory. And I have here in parentheses thermostat analogy because it's to remind me to talk about how this set point theory refers to the hypothesis that your brain regulates your weight, that in your what's called the ventromedial hypothalamus, no, you don't need to remember that, but you have a predetermined amount of weight. And if you go above that weight, your body tends to increase energy expenditure and decrease appetite. And if your body goes below that weight, for some reason your appetite increases and you wind up burning less calories. That's the thermostat analogy. Keep in mind that if you set the thermostat at a certain temperature, when it goes above that temperature, the air conditioning would go on. If it goes below that temperature, the heat would come on. So if you're using that as an analogy for set point theory, if your weight goes above that predetermined weight, your body works to lower that weight. If your body goes below that predetermined weight, your body works to increase back to that weight. You need physical activity. So what this is saying here is that maybe the set point theory doesn't hold for everybody. Remember, it's a theory. I'm not really sure how they can check this in anything other than mice. And we know about mouse research. Muscle tissue has a higher metabolic rate than fat. I mentioned this earlier, which is why we recommend people be active and increase their muscle mass. So yes, it does have a higher metabolic rate. It does burn more calories at rest. Not as much calories as people like to think, but as I said, there are a lot of benefits to improving your body composition beyond the fact that you may be burning more calories at rest. There are a number of hormones that can be involved in weight control. And these are the hormones that may be involved in that set point theory. Leptin is a hormone that's produced by fat cells that tends to lower or slow metabolism, while ghrelin tends to stimulate appetite. It tends to be released before meals and can be reduced by exercise. It's thought that if this set point theory was indeed a fact, if it could be proved to be correct in humans, that when you lose weight, when you go below your set point, that might increase the ghrelin. And when your weight goes above that predetermined set point, you might increase your leptin amount. Heredity can be involved in weight. These are pictures of the same young man who at the age of 3, on the left, you can see he was large, but by the age of 7, he had grown. What was found out was that this young man experienced a deficiency in the production of leptin. And leptin's that hormone that makes you feel full. And if you have a deficiency of leptin, then you won't experience fullness and you would continue to eat. Once this young man's leptin was replaced, he began to experience normal regulation of calories in versus calories out, and he took off that weight. When this was discovered, it was thought that perhaps leptin could help people lose weight, that giving people leptin would help lower their appetite and make them feel fuller sooner. However, what was discovered was that giving folks leptin only worked if you were leptin deficient. That didn't prevent snake oil salesmen from trying to sell you books and supplements based on this information. Obese people have billions more fat cells than people of average weight. And heredity can also affect the number of fat cells that you have, but dietary habits also contribute. Fat cells don't seem to go away when you're losing weight, and our fat cells are living, active cells that send out lots of signals, and the hypothalamus is an organ in the brain that I mentioned earlier that may be controlling weight. Women tend to have a higher percent of what's called essential fat than men. It's essential because it's used for pregnancy, for child rearing, for producing hormones to feed the newborn. And it may be one of the reasons why it's easier for men to keep off weight than it is for women. Women may be able to lose weight, but it may be harder for them to keep it off. And part of it may have to do with this essential fat. Let's look a little bit more closely at adipose tissue. And adipose is another name for fat. This is a picture on the left of adipose tissue that is made up of lots and lots of adipose cells. It stores excess energy as fat, and that energy can come from too much protein, too much carbohydrate, or too much fat. Any macronutrient consumed in excess of what the body needs will be stored as fat. Adipose tissue also sends out signals, and that can help regulate energy balance. So adipose tissue or adipose cells regulate energy balance through different hormone production, and these hormones can be that